Audio log of Vanessa Shepard, entry 4. The next few entries are going to be a continuous series. I figure I'll go over a few of the events in the history of the Reds, try to give you a sense of who they were, where I came from, and why I decided to leave them when I did. I'm going to try not to say too much at once, because I have to try to give you this picture of them with just my words, and I don't want it to feel like a history lesson or a lecture. Call it the thoughtful parent in me, I suppose. I'm going to start where it pretty much started for the organization, all the way back in 2157. The First Contact War. It was a scary time for pretty much everyone on Earth. I don't really remember any of it, I was 3 at the time, but most of the people I've shared barracks with over the years have told me they used to beat it into their heads when they were in school. There was definitely a lot of change going on, especially once the fighting was over. Humanity had finally discovered that it wasn't alone, and the galaxy was no longer empty to us. It was huge and imposing and intimidating, and people dealt with it in a bunch of different ways. While the Alliance was setting itself up to be the face of humanity in the galaxy and establishing interstellar policies for our diplomats, there was a document published over the internet that had its own ideas about where we should go in the future. It was an anonymous manifesto that called for a vanguard, a Cerberus, to protect human interests and expand humanity's influence throughout the galaxy. The document claimed that further attacks from other races were inevitable, and that we would need to be prepared for them at all times. Sound familiar? It worries me, but I can't rule out the possibility of a connection between the Cerberus who pulled strings at Pharos and the Cerberus whose manifesto gained a cult following 20 years ago, and influenced the creation of the gang that I grew up with. Now the only thing missing was motive, a reason for the founders to decide to take their business below the law, and that wasn't too far behind. It's all over the galaxy now, but red sand is a recent discovery on our part. The public only first got word of its benefits back in 2160, after years of research by human scientists. They published an article to the internet about it, talking about its chemical properties and its potential usefulness as an anticonvulsant for patients suffering from epilepsy. Biotics weren't too well known then, and testing it on minors was out of the question, but the document also had theories about using it as a stimulant for biotic powers, based on how it interacted with the nervous system. Of course, as with all new discoveries, the document did little more than to jack up the price of the drug to the point where only the richest people could afford it. And that was where the 10th Street Reds came in. The founders were firm believers in pro-humanism and the Cerberus Manifesto, but they put their own spin on it by wanting to strengthen the civilian population back home, rather than out in space. It wasn't like a civilian militia or anything, though. They wanted to strengthen people's bonds at home, so that if anything happened out there would be some sense of closeness and nationalism that would make us want to support the troops and protect ourselves. So the 10th Street Reds started off as a community committee with the best interests of humanity in mind, and the community committee part was a front for their backdoor shipments of red sand from the Mars archives. But they actually did help the community. They held public events throughout the year in the Vancouver area and used donations from attendees to pay for more events. Then again, they also put some of the donations into their black market suppliers, who siphoned off some of the sand shipments back on Mars and got them back to them discreetly without tipping off military or police personnel. So the Reds would then sell this to high-paying clients and use the money for the bulk of the event planning and drug dealing that they did. So it was dirty money, but the founders genuinely felt like they could help the people of Vancouver with the money that they got from their supply shipments. Their operations got pretty big after a few years though, and when that happened, they needed to outsource for some help. And what better way for a community committee to look good with the community than to pick up kids off the streets they were keeping safe, give them a place to live, and train them to be productive members of society. The Reds did just that, starting in the Vancouver neighborhoods that they were operating out of, but as their operation got larger, they started looking for help in other cities in the area. Next time we meet, I'll talk about what happened when they visited the orphanage in Victoria, and how I first got involved with the people that I spent most of my childhood working for.